Welcome to your daily audiobook. A place where stories come alive, where imagination opens secret doors, and every tale becomes a journey. Get comfortable, let the world fade away, and allow this story to carry you beyond the ordinary. Tonight's story will take you to a land where time stands still, where dreams can fly, and where childhood never truly ends. This is Peter Pan, a tale of wonder, courage, and the magic of believing. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the adventure begin. Chapter 1. In the quiet house on a proper street, the night air always seemed to pause at the darling nursery window, as if it were listening. The curtains would lift with the smallest breath of wind. The moon would lay a pale path across the floorboards, and the shadows would gather in a corner like shy visitors waiting to be invited. Wendy lay in bed, half awake, feeling the old tug in her chest that came when bedtime stories were over. John pretended he was brave even in sleep, his brow tight as if he were still planning battles. Michael curled small under his blanket like a warm secret the world could not steal. On the windowsill, a faint smear of green light flickered, then vanished. Nana, the great dog who ruled the nursery with a soft mouth and firm heart, slept near the door. She dreamed in little huffs, her paws twitching as if she ran after something only she could see. Every so often, her ears lifted, listening. Always listening. Wendy felt at first that the air had changed. Not colder, not warmer, just different, like the room had remembered something it was trying to forget. She sat up, her hair loose on her shoulders, and stared at the window. A small shape darted past the glass. Wendy's breath caught. She did not call out. Somehow she knew that if she made a sound too big, the moment would break apart like a bubble. The window, which should have been shut tight, eased open as if it had hands of its own. The curtains billowed inward. The scent of distant sea salt and crushed leaves floated in. A boy slipped into the room with the silence of a thought. He was not like any boy Wendy had ever seen. His smile was sharp and bright, like a knife made of sunlight. His clothes looked stitched from leaves and dare. And behind him, a tiny light danced, no bigger than a fist, glowing gold and angry, leaving a trail of glitter like spilled sparks. The boy looked around as if he owned the night. Then his gaze landed on Wendy, and his face lit up with sudden delight, like a child finding a toy he had misplaced. "You," he said, voice clear as a bell, "are the one who knows stories." Wendy's mouth went dry. She managed to whisper, "Who are you?" He placed a hand on his chest with dramatic pride. "Peter Pan." The tiny glowing creature, fairy, Wendy thought with a jolt, zipped to Wendy's face and hovered there, eyes narrow. The air around it hummed, like a furious bee. Peter turned as if he had forgotten something important. He moved toward the floor, searching, patting at shadows as though they were pockets. "My shadow," he muttered. "It ran away again." Wendy saw it then, a dark shape creeping along the floorboards, trying to slip under the bed like a guilty pet. Peter lunged for it, but it dodged him, flattening itself against the wall. Peter's grin faded into a stubborn scowl. "Stop being silly." Nana stirred. The fairy flared brighter, shooting sparks. Wendy's heart raced. The boy and his light were not just visitors. They were trouble made beautiful. And as Nana's eyes blinked open, Peter's shadow wriggled free and made a dash for the window, like it knew exactly what would happen next. Chapter 2. Nana rose in one smooth motion, no longer sleepy, suddenly all duty and teeth. She stared at the strange boy and the floating light as if deciding whether they were dreams or intruders. Her growl was low and deep, the kind that made the floor feel smaller. Peter froze, then lifted his chin, trying to look grand. But Wendy saw the quick flicker of fear in him, like a candle struggling in wind. The fairy shot forward, buzzing furiously. Its voice was like tiny chimes being shaken in anger. Wendy could not understand the words, but she felt their meaning. This dog is in the way. This is a disaster. This is your fault, Peter. Peter snapped back in the same strange language, pointing at Nana as if scolding a mountain for being tall. Wendy slid out of bed before she could think better of it. Nana, she whispered, holding out a hand the way she did when Michael cried. It's all right. Nana hesitated, torn between obeying Wendy and protecting the nursery. Her eyes narrowed, then shifted to Peter's feet, to his hands, to the open window. Nana did not trust the knight that could walk indoors. Peter tried to move. Nana barked once, sharp, final. The fairy zoomed to Peter's ear and screamed its glittering fury. Wendy's eyes watered from the brightness. Sparks rained down like angry confetti. Peter clapped his hands over his ears. All right, all right. He darted toward the wall where his shadow clung like spilled ink. He grabbed at it, but the shadow slipped through his fingers and skittered along the floor again. Peter's face flushed with frustration, and his pride cracked, letting something helpless peek through. Wendy's fears softened into curiosity. The shadow didn't behave like a shadow. It acted like a mischievous pet, as if it belonged to Peter but also enjoyed embarrassing him. Peter sat down hard on the floor, suddenly looking younger, more boy than legend. He stared at his empty hands. I can't catch it. The fairy hovered over him, folding its tiny arms, radiating insult. Wendy knelt beside Peter, careful, as if she might startle a bird. May I help? Peter looked up, suspicion and hope tangled in his eyes. Can you? Wendy reached for the shadow gently. It tried to slip away, but she placed her hands over it like a blanket, firm but kind. The shadow trembled, then went still. Wendy felt a thrill, as if she had caught a secret. Peter brightened, then frowned again. He pressed the shadow to his foot, trying to stick it where it belonged. It peeled away at once, as if refusing the idea. Peter's mouth twisted. It won't stay. Wendy glanced around the nursery. Her eyes landed on her sewing basket, the neat little box of tools that belonged to grown-up things. She opened it and held up a needle and thread as if offering a spell. Peter recoiled. What's that? Away, Wendy said softly, though her hands shook. If you let me. Peter stared at the needle as if it were a sword. The fairy's light dimmed, suspicious but interested. Nana watched, head tilted. The room held its breath. Wendy guided Peter to sit still. She pressed the shadow to his heel and began to sew, tiny careful stitches, binding darkness to skin like fastening a ribbon. The shadow wriggled once, then settled, obedient at last. Peter's eyes widened in awe. You did it! The fairy hovered close to Wendy, peering at her as if remeasuring her worth. Wendy smiled, relieved and proud. It's only sewing. Peter stood and tested his foot. The shadow moved perfectly with him now, as if it had never dared to rebel. Peter's grin returned, bigger than before. You're clever. He stepped toward the window and gestured grandly to the knight outside. Come with me. Wendy's stomach dropped. Where? Peter's eyes shone with a wild, hungry light. To Neverland. Where stories live. Behind him, the fairy flared gold again, and Wendy suddenly understood this was not a simple invitation. It was the moment that would change everything. And somewhere downstairs, a clock ticked like a warning. Chapter 3. Wendy backed away, her mind racing. Neverland sounded like a place a child might whisper into a pillow, half wishing it could be real. But Peter stood at her window as if he had stepped out of that whisper and into her room. I can't. Wendy said, though the word felt thin. I have school. And mother. And father. Peter blinked, puzzled, as if those things were distant countries he had never visited. Those aren't reasons. The fairy spun in a tight, angry circle, spraying a few sharp sparks that landed on the blanket and faded without burning. Its tiny face looked fierce, like a star that had decided to fight. Peter leaned closer. In Neverland, you won't have to grow up. That sentence slid into Wendy's chest and lodged there. Part of her thrilled at it. Another part felt a strange sadness, like a door closing somewhere far away. John sat up, startled by the voices. What's happening? Michael lifted his head, hair sticking up like feathers. Wendy? Peter turned to them with a proud smile, as if he had found extra treasures in the nursery. More children! The fairy's expression tightened. It did not look pleased. John rubbed his eyes, then widened them at the sight of Peter. Are you a pirate? Peter scoffed, as if insulted. I fight pirates. John's face lit up with instant admiration. He swung his legs out of bed like a boy preparing for adventure. Michael, still half asleep, stared at the fairy's glow and giggled. Little light! The fairy hovered above Michael's head, offended by being called anything so ordinary. Peter clapped his hands once, impatient. Come on! We fly there. Wendy's heart jolted again. Fly? Peter looked genuinely confused. Of course. He stepped back, lifted his arms slightly, and rose off the floor like a leaf caught in a warm updraft. He hovered there, grinning. See? John's mouth fell open. Michael's eyes turned round as buttons. Wendy felt the world tilt. Flying was not something that belonged in a nursery. Flying belonged in pictures and dreams and impossible stories. Peter floated down and spoke quickly, eager. You just need happy thoughts. He tossed a handful of fairy dust into the air. It glittered and drifted, slow and beautiful, like stardust deciding where to land. It settled on Wendy's shoulders, on John's hair, on Michael's blanket. Wendy felt the tingling warmth spread through her skin, as if her bones had become lighter. Peter grabbed Wendy's hand. His palm was warm and dry, full of confidence. Think of something happy. Wendy tried. Her mind jumped to Mother's kiss on her forehead, to Nana's comforting weight at the foot of the bed, to stories by the fire. Peter tugged her gently. Wendy's toes left the floor. A gasp burst from her throat. She rose higher, the room falling away beneath her like a dropped toy. Her nightgown fluttered. The air felt cool and new against her ankles. John whooped and launched himself upward, jerking and wobbling like a baby bird learning wings. Michael floated too, squealing with a laughter so pure it sounded like bells. Nana barked wildly, leaping up, trying to catch them, desperate to pull them back to safety. Her paws hit only air. Wendy reached down, torn. Nana! Peter's grin sharpened. No dogs! The fairy darted to Nana's nose and buzzed angrily, as if scolding her for daring to care. Wendy hovered near the ceiling, clutching Peter's hand, looking down at the nursery she had known all her life. The beds looked smaller. The toys looked suddenly lonely. Nana looked like a guardian left behind, eyes shining with worry. Peter guided them toward the open window. Cold night air rushed in. The world outside waited, dark rooftops, shining stars, a sky like a deep lake. Wendy hesitated on the edge of leaving. Peter's voice softened, tempting. Come on. You'll be the mother to the lost boys. They need you. The words, lost boys, flickered through Wendy's mind like lantern light in fog. And then, before she could decide, Peter pulled them through the window, and the nursery vanished behind them like a dream forgotten at waking. Chapter 4. The night swallowed them, But it was not frightening the way Wendy had imagined. It was wide and alive, filled with wind that smelled of chimney smoke and distant trees. The city lay below like a quilt of sleeping houses. Lamps glowed softly in windows, tiny squares of warm gold. Wendy's stomach swooped as she drifted above the rooftops. She clung to Peter's hand, afraid her courage might slip loose and fall. Peter flew as if he had been born in the air. He dipped and rose, spinning once just because he could. The fairy followed like a bright pet comet, circling their heads, sometimes darting ahead to scout, sometimes pausing to glare at Wendy as if to remind her she was a guest, not a leader. John tried to fly like Peter, chest puffed out, arms angled just so. He wobbled and nearly bumped a chimney, then corrected himself with a proud little laugh. Michael soared and dipped like a playful fish, laughing each time he sank and rose again. His joy seemed to hold him up more than the dust did. Below them, a dog barked, hearing something its eyes could not see. Somewhere, a baby cried. Somewhere, a father turned in bed, frowning at a dream he couldn't remember. Wendy's heart pinched. Will Mother notice? Peter tilted his head, puzzled again. Notice what? That we're gone. Peter shrugged lightly. Mothers always notice. There was something careless in the way he said it, as if it didn't matter. Wendy wanted to be angry, but the wind stole her anger and scattered it. The fairy made a sharp chiming sound, and Peter suddenly sped up. The world blurred. Wendy's hair streamed behind her. The stars seemed closer, cold points of light watching silently. They flew out beyond the last row of houses, beyond the city's edge, where the land turned into dark fields and thin lines of trees. The air grew cleaner, sharper. The sky widened even more, as if the world below had been holding it back. Peter called over his shoulder. Second to the right. Wendy couldn't help it. Second to the right of what? Peter laughed as if she had made a joke. Of the morning, silly. John nodded solemnly, as if that was perfectly sensible. Wendy tried to follow the strange path Peter described. The sky had no signposts. The stars did not arrange themselves into arrows. Yet Peter moved with certainty, as if he could smell the way. The fairy dust began to fade. Wendy felt it in her limbs first, a heaviness returning, subtle but terrifying. Her body remembered gravity. Peter noticed and darted closer, tossing more dust with a practiced flick. The glitter clung to Wendy's skin, brightening her again. Relief washed through her, followed by an uneasy thought: if Peter forgets, we fall. Michael yawned mid-flight, eyes drooping. His head dipped. He began to drift downward. Wendy's panic surged. Michael! Peter zipped down and grabbed Michael by the collar, hauling him upward with ease. He scowled at Michael as if being sleepy were a personal insult. Michael blinked awake, confused and frightened for a heartbeat, then giggled again when he realized he was still flying. I'm fine. But Wendy's hands trembled. The night was not a bed. The sky did not forgive mistakes. They flew for what felt like a long dream. The land below changed, forests like black oceans, rivers like ribbons of ink, mountains that rose like sleeping beasts. Clouds drifted past, soft as wool, sometimes brushing Wendy's cheeks like cold breath. At last, far ahead, Wendy saw a shadow different from the rest of the darkness, a shape like an island, floating in the world's imagination. It shimmered faintly, as if it were not fully tied to the earth. Peter's eyes gleamed. There! The fairy buzzed excitedly, brighter now, as if home was feeding her light. Wendy stared at the island, her fear and wonder twisting together. And then, rising from the dark water around it, she saw a flash of something white, like a fin cutting the sea, and heard, faint but unmistakable, a deep ticking sound. Peter's grin widened, but Wendy felt cold all the way through. Because ticking in the dark did not sound like a clock in a safe house. It sounded like a warning that something hungry was waiting. Chapter 5. As they drew closer, the island stopped looking like a distant idea and began to look like a real place with teeth. The shore glimmered pale. Jungle rose thick and tangled, a mass of leaves and shadows. Strange birds circled overhead, their cries sharp and wild. Somewhere, drums thumped faintly like a heartbeat. Wendy's skin prickled. Neverland felt like a story that could bite back. Peter slowed, hovering above the dark water. His face changed. The playful boy became something else, alert, watchful, proud. Like a young king guarding his kingdom. The fairy hovered at his shoulder, suddenly fierce, scanning the waves. John squinted down. "Is that a ship?" Wendy followed his gaze and saw it, a dark shape near the shore, tall masts rising like skeletal trees. Lanterns glowed faintly along its side. It looked less like a ship and more like a predator sleeping with one eye open. Peter's mouth curled. Pirates! Wendy's breath caught. Pirates were thrilling in stories. In the dark, they felt real enough to hurt. A splash sounded below. A white shape slid through the water again, fast and smooth. The ticking grew louder for a moment, then softened as the water carried it away. Michael clutched Wendy's arm. "What's that noise?" Peter answered too casually. "Just the crocodile." Wendy stared at him. "A crocodile?" Peter nodded, as if crocodiles were common as cats. "It swallowed a clock. Now you always know when it's coming." John's eyes shone with excitement, but Wendy felt sick. A clock inside a beast was not magical in a friendly way. It was cruel magic, an accident turned into a curse. They drifted closer to land, and Wendy began to see movement under the jungle canopy. Shadows darted. Eyes glinted. Something small and quick ran between roots, then vanished. Peter pointed toward a stretch of trees where the leaves formed a dark arch. "The Lost Boys live there." "Lost?" Wendy asked softly. Peter's grin returned. "They fell out of prams. Or wandered off. No one claims them. So they're mine." The way he said mine made Wendy uneasy. It sounded less like love and more like possession. The fairy made a sharp chiming noise, warning. Peter stiffened. "Stay close." A sudden whistle cut the air. Wendy barely saw the arrow before it struck the tree trunk beside Peter's head, vibrating there like an angry finger pointing at them. Another arrow followed, then another, thudding into bark, close enough that Wendy felt the wind of them. John yelped. Michael squealed and dropped lower. Peter spun in the air, eyes blazing with delight, not fear. "Indians!" A group of figures emerged from the shadows below, moving with silent grace. They wore bright paint and feathers, their bodies like living sculptures under the moon. Their leader stepped forward, tall and proud, eyes fixed on Wendy and the boys as if deciding whether they were enemies or prey. Wendy's throat tightened. She did not want to be prey in anyone's story. Peter called down in a loud, confident voice, speaking words Wendy didn't understand. The leader answered, and the air between them grew tense, heavy with old grudges. The fairy hovered near Wendy's cheek, whispering sharp, angry chimes. Wendy could not understand the words, but she understood the feeling. This is dangerous. This is your fault for coming. This is not a game. More arrows flew, warning shots, but warnings could become something else very quickly. Peter laughed, then suddenly darted sideways, pulling Wendy with him. They dropped toward the trees, dodging arrows and branches. Leaves slapped Wendy's face. The jungle smell wrapped around her, wet earth, sap, something sweet and rotten. They landed roughly on a thick branch. Wendy's feet slipped. She grabbed at bark and held on, heart pounding. Below, the figures moved closer, silent as smoke. Above, the ticking sounded again, nearer now, as if the sea itself had lifted its clock to listen. Peter leaned close to Wendy, his eyes bright with excitement. "Welcome to Neverland," he whispered. And then, from somewhere deep in the trees, came a sound like laughter, high, wild, and not entirely human. Wendy's grip tightened. She suddenly understood. The island had noticed them, and it was deciding what to do with them next. Chapter 6. They moved through the trees like shadows learning to run. Peter led, confident and quick, stepping from branch to branch as if the forest itself made paths for him. Wendy followed as best she could, her hands scraping bark, her nightgown snagging on twigs. John tried to look fearless, but his eyes were wide. Michael clung to Wendy whenever he could, trembling with excitement and fear. The fairy zipped ahead then back, lighting their way with brief flares. Below them, shapes gathered, small figures hiding in ferns and behind roots. Wendy glimpsed faces, boys with dirty knees and bright eyes, boys in leaf hats and patched clothes, boys with knives too big for their hands. They watched from the undergrowth like wary animals. One boy stepped out more boldly than the others. He lifted a handmade bough, his arms steady. His face was sharp with suspicion, but there was a softness under it, like someone who had been disappointed too many times. Peter landed on a branch above him and called down, "Toodles!" The boy, Toodles, tilted his head, frowning. His gaze locked onto Wendy, then slid to John and Michael. The boys in the shadows murmured, like wind through grass. Peter looked proud. "I brought you a mother!" Wendy startled. "Peter!" But the words tangled in her throat because another sound split the air, the hiss of something flying fast. An arrow. It came from deeper in the trees, not from Toodles. Wendy saw it too late. It struck Peter in the chest. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Peter's eyes widened. His mouth opened as if to laugh, then no sound came. He swayed, lost his balance, and toppled backward into the leaves. Wendy screamed. The fairy shrieked too, a piercing chiming wail that made the air vibrate. It dove downward after Peter, leaving a trail of frantic sparks. John leaned over the branch, face pale. "He's fallen!" Below, the lost boys burst from hiding, shouting and swarming like startled birds. Some looked terrified. Some looked angry. Toodles stood rigid, staring down as if he had just watched the sun drop out of the sky. Wendy's whole body turned cold. Peter, who had seemed untouchable, who had flown like a thought, had fallen like any other boy. She scrambled down, tearing her nightgown, hands slipping on wet leaves. The jungle closed around her, thick and loud. Branches grabbed at her hair. Somewhere nearby, a strange bird called out, sharp and mocking. Wendy pushed through ferns and found him. Peter lay on his back, eyes half closed, his face pale under the moon. The arrow was lodged in him, real wood, real harm. Wendy's stomach twisted. The fairy hovered above Peter's chest, buzzing in panic. Its light flickered wildly, as if it might go out from fear. The lost boys gathered in a circle, their faces lit by moon and fairy glow. They looked ready to fight, to cry, to run. They looked like children who had been told they must be warriors. Wendy knelt beside Peter, hands shaking. "Peter," she whispered. "Peter, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. His lips moved faintly. "Wendy!" Relief surged so hard Wendy nearly sobbed. Toodles stepped forward, voice rough. It was meant for the bird." Wendy stared at him. "What bird?" Toodles pointed at Wendy's nightgown, where the fabric fluttered like wings. His eyes were full of shame and stubbornness. "I thought you were a bird." Wendy's anger flared, then collapsed under the sight of the boys' hungry faces. They were not cruel. They were wild and frightened and longing for something they couldn't name. The fairy darted at Toodles, furious, pelting him with sparks. He flinched but did not move away, staring at Peter as if he would take the pain if it could undo the mistake. Wendy looked around desperately. "We need to help him." The boys shifted, uncertain. Then one boy, tall, with a serious face, spoke. "We can build a house around him." Wendy blinked. "A house?" The boy nodded as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "A home for the lady." The others murmured agreement, suddenly eager, clambering for branches, dragging leaves, snapping sticks. Their fear turned into frantic purpose. Wendy looked down at Peter again, breathing shallowly, fragile in a way that frightened her more than the arrows had. The jungle rustled, and Wendy felt again that Neverland was watching. And somewhere beyond the trees, faint but growing louder, came the steady tick-tick-tick, like time itself creeping closer through teeth and water. Chapter 7. By the time the moon climbed higher, the Lost Boys had turned panic into a storm of building. They worked with fierce focus, as if hammering a home into existence could keep death away. They snapped branches with bare hands, tied vines in tight knots, layered broad leaves like shingles. They dragged moss and soft grasses for bedding. They argued and laughed and snapped at each other, then worked harder, hungry to make something that would matter. Wendy watched, dazed, while the fairy hovered close, its light steadying now, though its tiny face still burned with worry. Peter lay on the ground, propped carefully on a pile of leaves. The arrow had been pulled away. How, Wendy didn't fully know, because the moment had blurred with fear and hands. There was blood, dark against his skin, and Wendy had to swallow hard each time she saw it. She took off her ribbon and pressed it gently to his chest, trying to stop the bleeding the way her mother had once done with a scraped knee. It felt too small for such a wound. Too gentle for this island. Peter's eyes opened now and then, glassy and unfocused. When he looked at Wendy, something softened in his face, as if her presence was a lamp in a dark place. Then his eyes would drift shut again. The boys built the house around Wendy, at least that's what they said. But Wendy saw the truth beneath their words. They were building around their own emptiness. A house meant warmth. A house meant someone who would tell them when to wash, someone who would patch their clothes, someone who would say their names with love. They were children pretending they didn't need to be cared for, and failing beautifully. When the house was finished, it stood strange and charming among the trees, crooked, leafy, stitched together from the forest itself. A little door made from bark. A tiny chimney made from hollow branch. It looked like something that could have grown there naturally, like a mushroom after rain. The boys stepped back, panting, proud. The serious boy approached Wendy. "It's your house." Wendy's voice was small. "But Peter, we'll put him inside," another boy said quickly, eager to fix everything. "He'll get better." They lifted Peter carefully and carried him into the leafy house, moving as if he were made of glass. Wendy followed, heart tight. The inside smelled of sap and fresh-cut leaves. The bed was a mound of moss and soft fur. Someone had even placed a little cup made from shell near the bed, as if Peter might wake and ask for water. Wendy knelt beside him. "Peter," she whispered. His eyes opened. He smiled faintly, stubborn even in pain. I'm not dead." Wendy's laugh broke out, half-sob. "No." The fairy hovered at Peter's forehead, then turned and glared at Wendy as if warning her not to take too much space in Peter's world. Peter's gaze drifted to the boys crowding the doorway. He lifted his chin, weak but proud. "Who shot me?" Toodles stepped forward, face tight with shame. I did. Peter stared at him a long moment. Wendy held her breath. Then Peter did something surprising. He smiled, quick, sharp, forgiving. Silly ass. Toodles flinched, but relief washed over him like rain. The other boys laughed, shaky with joy. The fear loosened its grip on the room. Peter's eyes slid back to Wendy. You'll stay, he murmured, like a command he was too tired to argue. Wendy should have said no. She should have thought of her mother's face, her father's voice, Nana's worried eyes. She should have turned and flown back through the window before the island tangled her up. Instead, she nodded. Outside, the jungle shifted and whispered. The boys began to chatter excitedly about supper, about games, about pirates, about tomorrow. Tomorrow in Neverland sounded less like a day and more like a dare. Wendy stepped out of the house and looked through the trees toward the dark line of shore. The pirate ship sat in the distance like a bad dream that refused to fade. And from the direction of the sea came the ticking again, steady, patient, followed by a low splash, as if something enormous had moved just beneath the surface. Wendy's skin prickled, because it sounded as if time itself was circling the island. And someone out there, someone who hated Peter Pan, was listening to that ticking and smiling. Chapter 8. Morning in Neverland did not arrive gently. It burst through the leaves in hot ribbons of light, woke the birds into loud arguments, and shook dew off branches like thrown beads. Wendy stepped out of the leafy house to find the lost boys already awake, already in motion, as if stillness might remind them they were lonely. Peter was sitting up now, pale but lively, his eyes too bright for a boy who had been wounded. He acted as if pain were a boring visitor he refused to entertain. The fairy hovered near him, watchful and possessive, like a tiny guard with a sharp temper. Wendy tried to fuss, offering water, smoothing his hair, asking if he should rest. Peter wrinkled his nose. Rest is for grown-ups. The boys cheered at that, as if he had given them permission to stay wild forever. From the far side of the forest, a boom rolled in, deep and distant. The lost boys fell silent. Peter's smile turned sharper. They're awake. Who? Wendy asked, though her stomach already knew. Peter pointed through the trees toward the shore. Pirates. They crept to a high place where the land sloped down to the sea. From there, Wendy could see the black ship more clearly. It rocked slowly on the water, tall and proud, its sails folded like sleeping wings. Men moved on deck, dark shapes with knives on their belts and hard laughter in their throats. And at the center of them, like a spider in the middle of its web, stood a man dressed finer than the others. His coat was rich and dark, his hair long, his posture elegant. But it was the metal shining at one arm that froze Wendy's breath. A hook. Even from far away, Wendy could sense the coldness of it, the way it replaced a human hand with a single sharp purpose. The man lifted the hook as he spoke, and the pirates around him leaned in like hungry dogs. Peter's voice, when he spoke, was almost pleased. Captain Hook. Wendy watched Hook's face as if looking could explain him. His smile did not reach his eyes. His eyes looked like someone who had stared too long at betrayal and decided to become it. John whispered, Why does he hate you? Peter shrugged as if it were a minor hobby. Because I cut off his hand. Wendy stared at him. Peter! Peter grinned. He was trying to kill me. The fairy made a tight, satisfied chiming sound, as if agreeing that pirates deserved everything they got. On the ship, Hook's mouth moved again. One pirate stepped forward, broad, cruel, with a voice that carried even across the water. He shouted something, and the other pirates roared with laughter. Then Wendy saw it, a plank dragged into place. A small figure, another pirate maybe, was pushed forward, stumbling. He fought, but the hook-hand captain didn't even touch him. He merely pointed. The figure was forced along the plank toward the sea. Wendy's hand flew to her mouth. She expected a scream, a splash, but before the figure could fall, the sea near the ship churned. A massive shape surged just beneath the surface. The ticking grew louder, terrifyingly close. The water bulged, and a jaw broke the surface briefly, white teeth like broken shells. The pirates shrieked and yanked the trembling man back. Hook stepped away, face taut. His eyes flicked toward the water with hatred and fear, then back toward the island with something even darker. Wendy understood. The crocodile was not just a beast. It was Hook's shadow, always following. Hook said something sharp. The pirates dispersed, muttering. One of them, a man with a sly face, looked toward the island, peering as if he sensed eyes watching him. Wendy ducked behind leaves, heart pounding. Peter, however, lifted his chin, utterly fearless. "He's looking for me." Wendy grabbed Peter's arm. "We should go." Peter's grin widened. "Let him look." But as Wendy pulled him away, she saw Hook turn slightly, his gaze sweeping the tree-line. For a moment, Wendy felt certain Hook could see through leaves, through distance, through her skin. And then Hook smiled. Not the smile of a man who had found what he wanted. The smile of a man who had found how to get it. Chapter 9. Peter decided that the best way to celebrate being alive was to show Wendy his favorite places, as if the island were a toy box and he could pull out wonders whenever he wished. The lost boys trailed behind, eager and loud. John marched like a soldier. Michael skipped like a song. They reached a lagoon where the water was so clear it looked like melted glass. Sunlight danced on the surface in bright shards. Smooth rocks ringed the water like seats around a stage. Peter crouched by the edge, grinning. "This is where the mermaids come." Wendy leaned forward, fascinated. "Real mermaids?" Peter scoffed. "Of course." The ferry hovered over the lagoon, its light a little dimmer here, as if it disliked the place. It made a warning chime. Wendy saw movement under the water, quick shadows, graceful. A face surfaced near a rock, a girl with seaweed dark hair and eyes like wet stones. She stared at Wendy without warmth, then smiled slowly. The smile was not friendly. It was sharp, like a cat showing its teeth. More mermaids surfaced, circling. Their skin shimmered. Their voices rose in singing laughter that sounded sweet until you listened closely and realized it was filled with mockery. One mermaid swam close to Peter and reached up, touching his hand with careless familiarity. Peter laughed and splashed water at her. She squealed and tried to pull him in. Wendy felt a strange pinch of jealousy, quick and embarrassing. She scolded herself immediately. He's just a boy. Yet he belonged to this place in a way she never would. The mermaids noticed Wendy's gaze. Their laughter sharpened. One of them swam closer, eyes narrowed, and spoke in a voice like water over stones. Wendy could not understand every word, but she understood enough. "Who are you to stand here? Who are you to be near him?" Wendy straightened. "I'm Wendy." The mermaids giggled as if her name were a joke. John, ever brave, stepped forward. "She's our mother." The mermaids' laughter burst loud, and some slapped the water with their tails, sending sparkling sprays into the air. Their eyes glittered with cruel delight. Peter leaned toward Wendy. "They're just playing." But Wendy didn't think it felt like play. The tide began to change. The waterline dropped slowly, as if the lagoon were being drained by invisible hands. Peter glanced at the rocks, at marks that showed where the water had been before. His face changed. "The tide will go out soon." Wendy looked around. The lagoon's center seemed deeper now, the edge more slippery. So? Peter's grin returned, mischievous. So we'll have to leave before we're stranded. The boys groaned and started to move away. But Wendy hesitated, one last look at the shimmering water. A mermaid surfaced right in front of her, so close Wendy could see tiny shells woven into her hair. The mermaid smiled again, and Wendy suddenly realized the smile meant nothing good. The mermaid reached up, grasped Wendy's wrist, and pulled. Wendy stumbled, feet sliding on slick rock. The water swallowed her ankles, then her knees. It was cold and heavy, yanking at her nightgown like hands. Wendy cried out. The mermaid's laughter rose, bright and delighted. They pulled harder. Peter turned, startled. For the first time, Wendy saw surprise on his face, then anger. He rushed back, grabbing Wendy's other arm. The fairy flared bright and furious, diving at the mermaids' faces, pelting them with sparks. The mermaids hissed and ducked under, but their hands still clung to Wendy. Wendy felt herself slipping, the rock vanishing under her feet. The lagoon suddenly looked less like a pretty place and more like a mouth. Peter yanked with all his strength. Wendy's shoulder burned. For a terrifying moment, she thought the mermaids would win. Then Peter shouted something fierce, words that cut like commands. The mermaids released Wendy at once, as if slapped. Wendy fell backward onto the rocks, gasping, soaked and shaking. The mermaids surfaced again, watching her with cold curiosity. Peter stood over Wendy, chest heaving, eyes blazing. Don't touch her. The mermaids laughed softly, and one of them lifted her chin as if to say, We'll touch whatever we like. Peter grabbed Wendy's hand and pulled her away. The lost boys hurried after them, suddenly quiet. As they left, Wendy looked back once. The lagoon gleamed innocent again. The mermaids' faces floated near the surface, beautiful and cruel. And behind them, far out at sea, Wendy heard the ticking again, faint, but steady, as if the crocodile had heard laughter and mistaken it for a dinner bell. Chapter 10. As the sun slid lower, the island's colors deepened. Greens turned darker, shadows thickened, and the air filled with the smell of smoke and crushed leaves. Wendy felt Neverland changing mood, like a face-shifting expression. Peter led them deeper into the forest, following a path only he could see. The fairy hovered close to Wendy now, less hostile, but still suspicious, like a tiny guard learning that Wendy might be useful. The lost boys were whispering. Wendy caught words. Redskins, tiger lily, campfire, war. John tried to look thrilled, but Wendy could see his swallow. Michael stayed close, eyes huge. They reached a clearing where tall poles stood in a circle, decorated with feathers and painted symbols. Beyond them, tents rose like low hills, and a fire burned at the center. Figures moved around it, silent and watchful. A drum began to beat. It was not a cheerful rhythm. It sounded like the island's own heart, steady and serious. Peter paused at the edge of the clearing. His posture changed again, boy becoming leader. We must be careful. Wendy's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Peter's eyes gleamed. They think I stole their princess. Wendy blinked. Did you? Peter grinned. Not exactly. The drumbeat grew louder, and Wendy saw her, Tiger Lily. She stood near the fire, tall and proud, her eyes sharp as arrows. Her face was calm, but Wendy felt the tension under it, like a bowstring pulled tight. A group of warriors surrounded her, speaking in low voices. Tiger Lily answered with calm authority, but her gaze kept flicking toward the forest as if expecting someone. Peter stepped forward openly. Instantly, bows lifted. Voices rose. The drumbeat stopped for a heartbeat, then started again, faster. Peter raised his hands, smiling as if he were greeting friends. He spoke quickly in their language, confident and teasing. The leader, an older man with a heavy necklace of teeth, stared at Peter with deep distrust. Tiger Lily's eyes locked onto Peter. Something like relief flashed there, quickly hidden. Wendy watched, fascinated and uneasy. This was not a child's game. These people lived by rules older than the nursery, rules that could spill blood. The older leader spoke again, voice rough. The warriors tightened their circle. Peter's smile faded. He glanced at Wendy, then at the boys. Wendy felt his mind working like a clever animal's, planning escape. Suddenly, a scream tore through the trees. A pirate stumbled into the clearing, panting, face twisted in terror. Behind him came more pirates, blades drawn, eyes wild. The camp erupted into shouting. Warriors surged forward. The pirates fought back. Chaos exploded. Wendy's breath caught. She saw a pirate grab Tiger Lily's arm, trying to drag her away. Tiger Lily struggled, fierce and silent, but the pirate's grip was iron. Peter moved like lightning. He launched himself at the pirate, striking him hard. The pirate fell. Tiger Lily jerked free. Another pirate swung a blade at Peter. The fairy shrieked and dove at the pirate's face, blinding him with sparks. Peter used the moment to kick him down. The lost boys, inspired, rushed in, throwing stones, shouting, swinging sticks like swords. John looked truly brave now. Michael screamed more than he fought, but even his small fists tried. Wendy stood frozen, then forced herself to move. She grabbed Michael's hand and pulled him behind a pole, sheltering him as best she could. The fight spilled across the clearing like a storm. Warriors moved with deadly grace. Pirates fought dirty, laughing even as they bled. Then Wendy saw it. A pirate, thin, sly, slipped toward Wendy's hiding place, eyes darting, searching. His gaze landed on Wendy. He smiled. Wendy's blood went cold, because she recognized that smile from the ship. It was the same sly pirate who had been watching the Retelling. He reached out, and at that exact moment, from far away on the sea, the ticking grew louder, as if something hungry had just turned toward land. Wendy tried to pull Michael away, but the pirate's hand closed around her wrist like a trap. Chapter 11. The pirate's fingers were rough and strong, smelling of salt and nettle. Wendy yanked, but his grip tightened, and pain shot up her arm. Michael squeaked and clutched at her waist, eyes wide with terror. The pirate leaned in close, his smile thin as a blade. "Quiet now," he hissed, voice slippery, "or I'll drop the little one like a stone." Wendy's stomach turned to ice. She froze, not daring to fight harder. Michael trembled against her, trying to hide inside her. Behind them, the clearing still roared with battle, shouts, drumbeats, splintering wood, the bright sting of fairy sparks. But here, under the pole's shadow, it felt suddenly silent, as if the pirate had wrapped a cloth around the world. He tugged Wendy backward, dragging her toward the trees. Wendy tried to think fast. Peter. John. Someone. But their voices were swallowed by the chaos. The pirate jerked her again. "Captain wants a word with you," he whispered, almost cheerful. "You're important." Important. The word landed like a curse. Wendy's eyes darted, searching for help. She saw John wrestling with a pirate near the fire, face red with effort. She saw Tiger Lily fighting like a storm, fierce and silent. She saw Peter in the center of it all, laughing as he struck and dodged, as if danger were music. He hadn't seen Wendy. The pirate pulled her into the trees. Leaves slapped Wendy's face. Branches snagged her hair. Michael stumbled, then the pirate grabbed him by the arm and dragged him too. Wendy's fear became a tight, hot thing. "Let him go!" she whispered, voice shaking. The pirate chuckled. A mother begging. That'll please the captain. They moved through a narrow path where the forest grew thick and damp. Wendy's bare feet slipped on roots. Somewhere nearby, something hissed. The island felt alive, watching, choosing. Then a small glow flashed in the dark. The fairy. It darted between branches, tiny and furious, leaving a trail of sparks like angry breadcrumbs. Wendy's heart leapt. The fairy was following, meaning Peter might follow too. The pirate noticed the glow and cursed. He swung his free hand wildly, trying to swat it. The fairy zipped away, then returned to buzz at his ear with mocking chimes. The pirate snarled. Stupid light! He stumbled, distracted for a moment. Wendy used the moment to twist and yank Michael toward her, pulling him behind her body. She kicked backward, her heels striking the pirate's shin. He yelped and loosened his grip. Wendy ran. Not far, she couldn't fly now, not without Peter's dust and guidance, but she ran with desperate speed, dragging Michael. The forest tore at her nightgown. Her lungs burned. The pirate recovered quickly. He chased, cursing, gaining ground. Wendy's heart hammered so hard she thought it might shatter. Ahead, the trees thinned. Moonlight spilled onto a slope leading down toward the shore. Wendy saw the sea, dark, restless. And the pirate ship, looming like a waiting mouth. No! Wendy breathed. The pirate's hand clamped on her shoulder. He shoved her forward, and Wendy stumbled onto the sand, nearly falling. Other pirates stepped out of the darkness, surrounding her. Their eyes gleamed with cruel delight. One of them lifted a lantern. Its light fell on Wendy's soaked hair, her torn nightgown, Michael's frightened face. The sly pirate grinned. Got her! Wendy's eyes flicked behind them, searching the trees. She saw only shadows. Then, faint but unmistakable, she heard it, tick, tick, tick. The sound came from the water beside the ship, closer than ever. The sea bulged, and Wendy saw a pale curve of back. The crocodile was here, circling. The pirates shuddered, but their fear quickly turned to excitement, as if danger made them feel more alive. Captain will be pleased, the sly pirate said. Wendy clutched Michael tighter as they were pushed toward a small boat waiting at the edge of the waves. And above the sound of the sea, Wendy imagined she heard something else, something like laughter, far away, boyish and fearless. But this time, it didn't feel comforting. It felt like Peter Pan had no idea how close she was to being swallowed by the wrong kind of story. Chapter 12. The small boat rocked as pirates shoved Wendy and Michael inside. The oars dipped, pulling them toward the larger ship. Wendy stared up at the towering dark hull, the ropes and ladders like a cage built for the sea. Michael whimpered. Wendy stroked his hair, trying to steady her own shaking hands. Stay close, she whispered. Don't speak unless I tell you. The ship creaked above them, alive with pirate footsteps. A rope ladder dropped, and a pirate hauled Wendy up as if she were cargo. She climbed with trembling arms, Michael clinging behind her, and the salty wind slapped her face. On deck, lanterns swung, throwing moving shadows across barrels and coils of rope. Pirates stared, grinning, whispering. Wendy felt their eyes like dirty hands. Then a voice cut through the murmurs, smooth, controlled, dangerous. Bring her here. The crowd parted. Captain Hook stepped forward. Up close, he looked even more like a nightmare dressed as a gentleman. His coat was fine, his boots polished, his hair carefully arranged. His face was handsome in the way a blade can be handsome, clean, cold, made for harm. The hook at his wrist gleamed in the lantern light, curved and eager. Hook's eyes landed on Wendy. They softened, Too quickly, too perfectly, like a mask sliding into place. "My dear," he said, bowing with exaggerated grace. "What a pleasure!" Wendy's stomach clenched. "Where is Peter?" Hook's smile widened. "Straight to business." "How refreshing." Michael pressed against Wendy's side, shaking. Hook's gaze flicked to Michael. He made a small sound of annoyance, then waved a hand. "Take the little one below. Give him something sweet. He will not be harmed, unless the night turns unpleasant." Wendy stepped forward, panicked. "No!" Hook lifted his hook slightly, a polite warning. "I said, my dear, no harm." "Not yet." Pirates reached for Michael. Michael began to cry, clutching Wendy's nightgown with desperate fists. Wendy's voice broke. "Please!" Hook's eyes narrowed. "Peter Pan does not beg. So I do not expect you to beg either." Wendy swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. "Then don't take him." Hook's smile returned, sharp and satisfied. "You are brave. I do admire bravery. It makes breaking people so much more interesting." The pirates pried Michael away. He shrieked, reaching for Wendy. Wendy lunged, but two pirates held her arms. "Wendy!" Michael cried. Wendy's heart felt like it was tearing. "Michael!" Hook watched calmly, as if observing a play he had paid for. When Michael vanished below deck, Hook leaned closer, voice velvet. "Now, let us talk like civilized enemies." Wendy glared, tears hot in her eyes. "You're not civilized." Hook's lips twitched. "Ah. You wound me." He circled her slowly, like a man examining a prize. Wendy forced herself not to flinch. "You are the mother," Hook said at last, voice thoughtful. "The little governor of their tiny hearts. Peter keeps boys, you see, but he does not truly understand them. He does not know how to hold them. He only knows how to lead them into danger." Wendy's throat tightened, because there was truth hidden inside the cruelty. Hook's eyes gleamed. "So here is my invitation. You will go back to them. You will tell them Peter is in trouble. You will bring them to me." Wendy's stomach dropped. "No." Hook sighed as if disappointed. "Then perhaps we will do this another way." He lifted the hook and tapped it lightly against a wooden railing. The sound was soft, but it made Wendy's skin crawl. "You will go," Hook continued, voice suddenly colder, "because I have your little brother below deck. And because I am very tired of being hunted like an animal by a boy who laughs." Wendy's anger flared. "You're afraid of him." For a moment, Hook's face twisted. In his eyes, Wendy saw it, the humiliation, the rage, the helpless fear. Then the mask snapped back into place. "I fear very few things," Hook said softly. From the side of the ship came the ticking again, closer now, mocking. Hook's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked toward the rail, toward the dark water beyond. Wendy realized the crocodile was still circling, patient as time. Hook leaned in until his face was inches from Wendy's. His breath smelled of bitter drink and old anger. "Go," he whispered, "or the little one will learn what it means to be lost at sea." Wendy's mind raced. If she agreed, she would be betraying Peter. If she refused, Michael might die. Hook stepped back and spread his arms grandly. "Choose." Wendy's hands curled into fists. Her voice came out thin but steady. "I'll go." Hook smiled, triumphant, delighted. "Excellent." He gestured to the pirates. "Give her a boat. Let her return to her little nest." Wendy turned, heart pounding, and looked once more toward the dark forest of the island. Somewhere in there, Peter Pan laughed at danger. Wendy prayed he would still be laughing when she arrived, with Hook's trap hidden under her tongue. Chapter 13. The pirates pushed Wendy into a small boat and sent her away from the ship like a parcel they were certain would arrive. The oars dipped. The water slapped the sides. The lantern glow faded behind her, leaving only the moon and the black shape of Neverland's shore. Wendy's arms ached as she rowed. Her thoughts ached more. Michael was still on the ship. Hook's words replayed in her head, "Bring them to me," like a worm writhing in her ear. Wendy tasted fear and anger, and a helpless sadness that made her want to scream. The beach appeared, pale and empty. Wendy dragged the boat onto the sand and ran into the trees, stumbling, calling softly for the lost boys, for Peter, for anyone. The fairy found her first. It flashed into view like a furious star. It hovered at Wendy's face, chiming in harsh bursts, accusing, demanding. Wendy couldn't understand the words, but she understood the meaning. Where have you been? What did you do? Where is the little one? Wendy swallowed hard. He's been taken. The fairy's glow flared so bright Wendy had to squint. It shot upward, zipping through branches, leaving a trail of sparks like a signal flare. Wendy followed, breathless, until she reached the clearing near the leafy house. The lost boys swarmed her the moment she appeared. Their faces were anxious, their voices loud, questions spilling out like marbles. Where were you? Did the pirates get you? Where's Michael? Is Peter here? Wendy's throat tightened. Michael has been taken to the pirate ship. A heavy silence fell. The boy's eyes widened. Someone made a small, wounded sound. Then Peter dropped from a branch above, landing lightly, grin already in place, until he saw Wendy's face. His grin vanished. What happened? He demanded. Wendy stepped closer, voice trembling. They took Michael. Captain Hook, he told me to bring you. Peter's eyes narrowed, sharp with anger and something like disbelief. Bring us? Wendy nodded. He said he'd hurt Michael if I didn't. The fairy hovered at Peter's shoulder, chiming angrily, like a blade being sharpened. Peter's face went hard. We'll get him back. The lost boys erupted into nervous chatter, some eager, some frightened. John looked pale but determined, jaw tight. Wendy saw him swallow and stand straighter anyway. Peter lifted his chin. We attack. Wendy's stomach lurched. She had expected fear, planning, maybe retreat. But Peter's answer was always the same: leap first, think later. Wendy grabbed his arm. Hook wants that. It's a trap. Peter looked at her as if the word, trap, were a small, boring thing. I know. You know? Wendy's voice rose. Then why? Peter's smile flickered back, wild and bright. Because traps are fun. Wendy stared at him. For the first time, she felt angry not at Hook but at Peter's carelessness. Michael was not a game. Peter leaned closer, voice lower. He thinks he can scare me. He thinks he can make me bring my boys to him like sheep. He glanced at the lost boys, eyes softening for a heartbeat. But they're not sheep. They're mine. Again that word. Mine. Wendy felt the island shift under her feet. She realized Peter's love was not the gentle kind she knew from home. It was fierce, hungry, proud. It could protect, and it could swallow. Peter turned to the boys. Listen. We'll go tonight. Wendy's heart thudded. Tonight? Peter nodded. When they're sleepy and stupid. The lost boys cheered weakly, trying to borrow Peter's confidence. Wendy watched their faces, children pretending to be brave because Peter expected it. Peter stepped closer to Wendy, suddenly soft, almost charming. You did well. You came back. Wendy wanted to shake him. I came back because I had no choice. Peter laughed, light and careless, and Wendy felt the anger flare again. Then she saw something that chilled her. In the doorway of the leafy house, a small cup sat beside Peter's bed, filled with clear water that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Hook had spoken of poison with such easy cruelty. Wendy's skin prickled. Where did that water come from? One of the boys shrugged. Found it. For Peter. The fairy made a quick, sharp chime, warning. Wendy stepped toward the cup, heart pounding. The water looked normal. Too normal. Like a calm surface hiding teeth. Peter, behind her, said casually, It's for me. Wendy's hand hovered above it. She imagined Peter drinking, trusting, laughing, and dying. Wendy's breath hitched. No, she whispered. She picked up the cup and flung it out the doorway, letting it splash into the earth. The lost boys gasped. Peter stared at her, shocked. Why did you do that? Wendy's voice shook. Because Hook is clever. For the first time, Peter looked uncertain. And in the distance, from the dark sea, the ticking sounded again, steady, patient, like the island itself counting down to night. Chapter 14. Night slid over Neverland like a dark blanket. The jungle quieted, but it was not a peaceful quiet, it was the kind that listens. Shadows gathered beneath leaves. The moon rose, pale and watchful, painting the pirate ship in silver where it waited by the shore. Peter moved among the lost boys, whispering plans with bright eyes and restless hands. To him, the coming fight was a game he had played 1,000 times, each time more thrilling than the last. The boys tried to copy his confidence, but Wendy saw the fear trembling under their bravado like a thin drum skin. John tightened his belt. Michael was not there to joke with him. That absence was a wound. The fairy hovered near Wendy, dimmer than usual, as if worry were draining her light. She made small nervous chimes whenever Wendy looked toward the sea. Peter gave the signal, and they moved. They crept through the forest, slipping between roots and ferns, following paths only Peter seemed to know. The air grew salty as they neared the shore. Wendy's heart pounded so loudly she was afraid the pirates would hear it. The ship loomed ahead, black and tall, ropes hanging like spider silk. Lanterns glowed on deck, but many were dark, as if the ship pretended to sleep. Peter grinned. Perfect. He led them into the water, waiting silently. Wendy shivered as cold waves lapped her legs. They reached the hull, where a rope ladder dangled, waiting. Peter went first, climbing with smooth ease. One by one, the lost boys followed, hands slipping, breath held. Wendy went last, praying with every step that Michael was still alive. She hauled herself onto the deck and crouched behind a barrel. The air smelled of tar and old wood. Somewhere below, a pirate snored. Somewhere else, a man laughed softly in his sleep. Peter signaled the boys to spread out. They moved like nervous mice, hiding behind ropes and crates. Wendy scanned the deck, desperate to see Michael. She saw only pirates. Then she heard a sound, a faint, frightened sniff. Wendy turned and saw him, sitting near the mast, wrists tied, eyes wide and wet. Michael! Wendy nearly cried out, but she clamped her hand over her mouth. Relief rushed through her so hard she felt dizzy. She began to crawl toward him. A shadow moved. Wendy froze. Captain Hook stepped into a pool of lantern light, his coat flowing, his hook gleaming. He was not asleep. He had never been asleep. Ah, Hook said softly, as if to an invisible audience. Right on time. From the shadows, pirates rose, dozens of them, blades flashing. The lost boys were suddenly surrounded. Peter sprang forward, furious. You cheated! Hook smiled thinly. My dear boy. I am a pirate! Wendy's stomach dropped. She had walked straight into the trap. Hook's eyes flicked to Wendy, then to Michael. "You see, I knew you would come. You are predictable. You love your little ones. You cannot help yourself." The fairy darted forward, blazing with rage, but Hook waved a small bell, and its ringing made the fairy falter, light flickering. Peter's jaw tightened. He looked at Wendy, then at the boys, then at Hook. For the first time, Wendy saw something like doubt in his eyes. Hook lifted his hook and pointed it toward Peter. "Now, boy who never grows up, let us finish our little story." The ticking rose suddenly from the water below, loud, close, like a clock striking the wrong moment. And Wendy knew, with terrible clarity, that every side was about to collide: pirates, children, and something hungry beneath the sea. Chapter 15. The ticking grew louder, echoing up the sides of the ship like a heartbeat. Pirates shifted nervously. Even Captain Hook's perfect posture stiffened, his eyes flicking toward the dark water below. Peter noticed. A slow smile spread across his face. "You hear that, don't you?" Peter said lightly. "Your old friend is coming." Hook's jaw tightened. Silence. But the ticking did not stop. It grew stronger, joined by a deep, rolling splash. The sea beside the ship bulged, as if something massive were pushing up from beneath. The pirates murmured in fear. Hook lifted his hook sharply. "Hold them!" Two pirates seized Peter's arms. The lost boys struggled against their captors, shouting and kicking, but they were outnumbered. Wendy fought against the hands gripping her, trying to reach Michael. Michael cried out, "Wendy!" Hook turned toward the sound. "Ah, the little one! Still alive, as promised." Wendy glared at him. "You won't get away with this." Hook's smile was thin and cruel. "I always do." Then the water exploded. A huge pale shape surged upward beside the ship. The crocodile's massive jaws snapped at the air, teeth flashing white. Its eyes were dull and ancient. From inside its belly came the terrible, steady tick-tick-tick. Pirates screamed. Some ran. Some fell to their knees. One pirate tripped and slid toward the rail, his cry cut short as the crocodile lunged and dragged him screaming into the sea. Hook staggered back, face strained of color. His hook shook for the first time Wendy had seen. "No," Hook whispered. "Not now." Peter laughed, wild and bright. "It followed you." The chaos gave the lost boys their chance. Pirates loosened their grips to flee, and the boys twisted free. Peter yanked his arms loose and leapt forward, kicking a pirate into a pile of ropes. Wendy rushed to Michael, pulling him close. She untied his wrists with shaking fingers. "It's all right," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. The fairy flared again, brighter than ever, freed from Hook's spell. It dove at pirates' faces, scattering them with angry sparks. Hook backed away, eyes fixed on the crocodile as it circled the ship, its body scraping the hull. The ticking was deafening now, as if time itself had climbed aboard. "This isn't over," Hook snarled at Peter. "You can't hide forever." Peter grinned. "I don't hide." Hook turned and ran. He leapt for the rail just as the crocodile surged again. Its jaws snapped inches from him, missing only because Hook twisted away at the last second. He tumbled into a hanging net, clinging desperately as the beast circled below. Peter didn't hesitate. He ran after Hook, laughter ringing across the deck. Wendy's heart leapt into her throat. "Peter!" Peter vaulted onto the rail, chasing Hook along the edge of the ship. The two figures moved against the moonlit sky, boy and pirate, light and dark, freedom and fear. The crocodile lunged again. Hook screamed. Peter leapt back just in time, landing lightly, still laughing. Hook lost his grip and fell, dropping into the sea with a splash and a shriek. The water churned violently. The ticking suddenly grew louder, then stopped. A terrible silence followed. Wendy stared at the dark water, heart pounding. Is he? Peter peered over the rail, eyes bright. Maybe. The sea smoothed. No bubbles. No sound. The pirates who remained stared in horror, then turned and fled, throwing themselves into boats, or jumping overboard to swim for their lives. The ship was theirs. Michael clutched Wendy, shaking. Wendy held him tight, tears finally spilling. Peter stood tall at the rail, triumphant, as if he had just won the greatest game of all. But Wendy looked at the quiet sea and felt a chill. Because in Neverland, things rarely ended. They only waited. And somewhere beneath the dark water, something might still be listening. Chapter 16. The pirate ship drifted in uneasy silence. Lanterns swung gently, casting long shadows over the empty deck. The cries and chaos were gone, swallowed by the sea, leaving only the whisper of waves against wood. Wendy still held Michael, her arms wrapped tight around him as if he might vanish again. His face was pale, but his breathing was steady now. He clung to her, eyes closed, worn out by fear. John stood nearby, chest rising and falling fast, trying to look brave even though his hands shook. The lost boys wandered the deck, staring at the ropes, the cannons, the abandoned hats and swords. Some of them laughed, giddy with survival. Others were quiet, suddenly unsure what to do without enemies to fight. Peter stood at the rail, looking out over the water where Hook had fallen. His face was calm, almost bored, as if the great danger had already turned into an old memory. Wendy watched him and felt something twist inside her. You could have been eaten, she said softly. Peter shrugged. He was closer. That doesn't make it better, Wendy replied. You don't care if you get hurt. Peter turned, surprised. Why should I? Wendy searched his face. He truly did not understand. To Peter, danger was only another kind of fun, another way to feel alive. Because people would miss you, Wendy said. The boys would. I would. For a moment, something flickered in Peter's eyes, something like confusion, or maybe something softer. Then it was gone. He smiled his careless smile. I don't get missed. Wendy felt a quiet sadness settle over her. The fairy hovered near Peter, glowing gently now, as if pleased that he was safe again. It did not look at Wendy. Peter clapped his hands. Come on! We've got a ship. We should celebrate. The lost boys cheered weakly. They wanted to be happy. They wanted to forget how close they had been to losing everything. But Wendy could not forget. She looked around the deck, the ropes that had held her, the place where Michael had been tied, the dark stain where someone had fallen. This was not a place for children. We should go back, she said. Back to the island. Back to the house. Peter nodded. Sure. They lowered a boat and climbed in, rowing back toward the shore. The ship loomed behind them, empty and broken, like a bad dream left behind. When they reached the beach, the jungle welcomed them with damp, green shadows. The lost boys ran ahead, eager for familiar ground. Wendy walked slowly, Michael's hand in hers, John close behind. She felt the island watching them again, as if it were pleased the story had continued. At the leafy house, the boys collapsed in a heap, laughing and talking all at once. Peter dropped onto the mossy bed, relaxed, as if he had not nearly been lost to teeth and time. Wendy knelt beside him. Peter, what happens now? Peter yawned. We'll play tomorrow. And after that? More playing. Wendy swallowed. What about when we grow older? Peter frowned slightly, as if the words were strange. You won't. The fairy chimed softly in agreement. Wendy looked at John and Michael, already dozing. Their faces were peaceful, but Wendy could see something new in them, a quiet tiredness, a weight they had not had before. They had seen too much. Wendy sat back, hugging her knees. The island felt less magical now and more like a beautiful cage. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. The sea whispered secrets. And far away, faint but real, Wendy thought she heard something again, not ticking this time, but a soft, lonely sound, like a story waiting to end. Chapter 17. The morning in Neverland was bright and loud, but Wendy felt something inside her pulling in the opposite direction, like a tide turning. The lost boys laughed and ran, already planning new games. Peter flew in lazy circles above them, light and careless, never staying in one place for long. Wendy watched him from the doorway of the leafy house. He was beautiful in motion, free in a way no one else was. But Wendy knew now that his freedom had a shadow. It meant he never stayed. It meant he never learned how to hold anyone close. John and Michael came to her side. "I want to go home," Michael whispered. John nodded. "So do I." Wendy's heart squeezed. She felt the same ache. The memory of their mother, of Nana, of their small warm beds, had grown stronger with every danger they had faced. Wendy looked up as Peter swooped down, landing lightly beside her. "Come play," he said. "I've got a new idea." Wendy shook her head gently. "Peter, we have to go back." He blinked, confused. "Back where?" "Home." The word felt heavy and true in her mouth. Peter frowned. "You can stay here. Forever." "That's just it," Wendy said softly. "We don't want forever. We want tomorrow. And the next day. We want to grow." Peter stared at her as if she was speaking a different language. The fairy hovered close to him, glowing brighter, as if trying to protect him from words he didn't want to hear. Wendy knelt so she was level with Peter. "You can come with us." Peter shook his head quickly. "No. I belong here." Wendy saw the fear behind his stubborn smile. If he left Neverland, he might have to become something else. Someone who remembered. John and Michael held Wendy's hands. "We'll never forget you," Wendy promised. Peter looked away. "I don't like goodbyes." "I know," Wendy said. The fairy chimed sadly, softly for once. Soon they were flying again, following Peter through the sky toward the faraway city. Wendy looked down at Neverland one last time, the forests, the lagoon, the ship in the distance, all shrinking into a story behind her. When they reached the nursery window, it stood open, waiting, just as it had before. Wendy, John, and Michael slipped inside. The room was quiet, safe, warm. Nana stirred and ran to them, licking their faces, whining with joy. Wendy turned back to the window. Peter hovered outside, framed by the night. For a moment, he looked small. "Come visit," Wendy said. Peter smiled. "I will." And then he flew away, laughing, already forgetting the tears in Wendy's eyes. The windows slowly closed. But Wendy knew that somewhere beyond the stars, a boy who would never grow up was still flying, chasing stories, chasing danger, chasing a kind of happiness that never stayed. And sometimes, when the night was very still, Wendy would swear she could hear him, tapping softly at the glass, as if part of him still wanted to come home. Thank you for listening to your daily audiobook. If this story made you dream, smile, or travel somewhere magical, you're always welcome back. New stories wait here every day, stories to relax, inspire, and remind you that wonder is never far away. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, subscribe, and stay with us for more timeless tales. Until our next adventure, Sleep well, dream deeply, and let stories guide your heart.